Today's presentation is going to be focused on what did we learn from that, and how can we help our organizations accelerate the development of AI capabilities so we can deliver better business outcomes. My name, for those of you that don't know, is Michael McCallum. I am, oops, sorry guys. I'm out of the Philadelphia area. Very fortunate to be introduced to the consulting space early in my career, especially within the Agile space. Been helping organizations deliver value ever since. My claim to fame is really about being pragmatic and adaptable. Every organization is different. It's not one size fits all, and it's really about meeting them where they're at, understanding what they're trying to achieve, and helping them build a runway to achieve that. I am also a self-proclaimed data nerd. I've had more success using data to drive change than without it. It helps me tell the narrative, drive alignment, gain insights that may not have surfaced without being able to see the data. And in 2017, we built a assessment platform that helps measure change and adoption, known as Lean Agile Intelligence. And organizations have been using it ever since to help measure adoptions within many different domains, whether that be Agile, whether that be implementing a product operating model. We're seeing a lot of that the past few years. And now, obviously, with AI, how can we help organizations see where they're at on the journey and help drive the behavioral change? And that's going to be a big topic today to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve. Today, what we're going to learn is we're going to look at why any type of change adoption stalls. What are the patterns that are typically seen? What can we do as change agents, leaders, to prevent that? And then how do we go about achieving that and driving the desired outcomes? Now, the first thing, before we even start, right, the movement of AI, I think we would all agree, is real, right? We see it in our personal life. We probably use it for all types of aspects. We have spent the past 14 months talking to a number of different clients, and the question is no longer should we adopt AI, right? But it's more about how do we effectively use it, right? So many organizations are embarking on this journey. They're installing tools. They are soliciting help from a lot of the big four on developing strategies. And so everyone that we've seen is in the midst of this adoption and now really focusing on, hey, how do we accelerate the adoption so we can achieve the outcomes that we want? We use it internally, and we have learned a lot over the past 3 years. We use AI across our product management space for discovery and research, for writing stories, for documentation. Our developers use it for scaffolding code, generating use cases, creating test cases, etc. And so we have personally seen the power of AI and can attest that this is real, right? There's something here to be gained. And it's not going to change. It just continues moving very, very fast, right? Companies are investing millions of dollars in AI infrastructure, sealed a deal with Google, right, where they're going to be using a lot of their infrastructure. The technology is improving at an incredible pace. It's getting better from a response standpoint drastically over the past couple of years, and we're seeing these rollouts of these updates to these platforms very, very quickly. And so how do we stay on pace with this fast movement. Um, Before we jump into to the change adoption, I think it's important to level set on what is it that organizations are after? And there's a number of different ways that across different industries that organizations are using AI. But at the highest level, and we all know this, the outcomes typically fall into two buckets. Okay. It's really about how do we use AI to reduce cost and do what we all already do cheaper, faster, and better, right? How do we improve the efficiency, eliminate waste, ultimately to improve our margins, right? So that's that bottom line impact, doing what we're already doing better and faster. The other major bucket that it falls into is innovation, right? How do we use AI to create value for our customers, solve their problems, and generate new sources of revenue? All right. So, very much about growth, differentiation, customer value, and gaining a competitive advantage. So we're really talking about top level impact. Now, I have Prima with me, who's at LAI, and she's going to trigger a poll here because we want to understand where your organization is at to help drive some of the contents going forward. So if you can take an opportunity to answer the poll, we would greatly appreciate it. All right, they're coming in. 50 people here, 20 received so far. All right, we're almost there. 38 out of 50. Okay, well, I'm just going to pull over. I'm lucky I get to see the results. And this is as expected, where a number of organizations are focusing on both, which completely makes sense, right? We have done the same. We have implemented AI into our product to help our customers and drive new revenue sources. We have also implemented AI into our internal workflows to be able to gain those efficiencies, drive down our cost, and do more with the same amount of resources. So this is typically what we see, some good validated learning here. And a lot of organizations are focusing on both. What's interesting here, and this also aligns to what we see in the industry, is that some organizations are really, when they're first dipping their toe in the AI waters, they're focusing on productivity, right? Because it's low-hanging fruit, if you will. It includes really just rolling out tools. Well, a lot of organizations think it just includes that. But that makes sense. And so today's session is going to be focused on productivity. We're going to do future webinars. We enjoy these on the innovation piece, but we're going to really double click because it's a broad topic, right? AI in general. And so we're going to really double click on the productivity piece and lowering cost. Now, I am a big change management guy, being in the consulting space and the agile coaching space for so long. And I'm a big fan of the ACAR change management framework. And I think whenever you look at any type of transformation or any type of adoption of anything, new tooling, new ways of working, it's always good to use a structured approach to drive that change and gain alignment across all of your stakeholders. Now, ACAR, for those that don't know what it is, it's developed by ProSci, okay? And it helps individuals, teams, and organizations, so all different levels, to successfully navigate that change. It's commonly used in transformation, technology implementation, process improvements, any type of project that really includes changing the way people work. And it's very people centric. What I really like about it is it's simple, it's practical. It provides a pretty straightforward structured roadmap where you can kind of pick and choose amongst the different stages that we'll look at for what makes sense to you. And it really allows leaders to pinpoint where are people struggling with the change so they can target it support for them. ACAR stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement, which we'll dive into now. All right, so for awareness, awareness is really about the why. Okay, it's about articulating why AI matters to the business, what are we trying to achieve, and why we need to do this and embark on this change. Desire is about helping people understand why they should engage in the change, and this is an important one, right? Because we all been there. You can roll out a new process, a tool, but that doesn't mean that people are going to follow it, that they're going to change their behaviors from what they do today, and that's key. That idea of change behaviors is something that we're going to talk a lot about within an AI adoption in the next 45 minutes or so, right? And the reason desire is so important is we're humans, right? We are complex adaptive systems in and of itself, and we're creatures of habit. There has to be a motivation to change. People need to understand what is in it for me. Knowledge is about educating people. It's about equipping them with the skills they need to successfully adopt the change. It's a foundational step. Ability is turning that knowledge into consistent behaviors so that the change is applied in real work and it's actually applied to achieve the outcomes that we're after. And then finally, reinforcement. Reinforcement is about staying with it, right? Again, we're humans, creatures of habit. Without reinforcement, there's a high likelihood that we'll revert to old ways of working. Now, what I also like about the ACAR model is not only does it give you the stages, but it also then starts to help you with tactics on how you go about improving them. And so, for example, awareness, announcing the change. We've all been in town halls. We've all seen emails of, hey, here's something we need to do as an organization. And here's why, right? And organizations are pretty good at that. The designer piece, from my experience, not so much. Okay. A lot of organizations don't understand that it's really important to make sure that people understand what's in it for them. Okay. Invite them to be part of the change. Don't inflict the change upon them, right? And for all those agilists out there on the webinar, that's something that we've been dealing with and coaching and teaching for 20 years now. And it really applies to any change. Knowledge is about providing the training, giving helpful resources, and then identifying some gaps that we need to fill from a skill perspective. And then ability is the hands-on work, right? Providing SME assistance. Another analogy is Agile coaching was, that ability, making sure that people have the resources they need to drive the improvements they need. And really looking at what are we trying to achieve at this level, right? Typically team or individual, setting goals and measuring. And then reinforcement is about tracking progress on those measurements, inspecting and adapting, gathering feedback on where it's working, where it's not. And that's more of an iterative cycle. I like to think of ability and reinforcement as an iterative cycle not necessarily sequential. If you know me, you'll know that I am a man of simplicity. Um, and really, there's two higher groups here. What we're really talking about is change activation, where you're preparing people to build understanding, create motivation, and equip them with the skills, the initial skills to achieve the goals, as well as we're talking about adoption and impact, changing and sustaining those behaviors so that change is applied consistently and we are achieving the desired outcomes. Now, from my experiences, um, there's a little bit of a gap here. Organizations are really good at the activation piece. Definitely the awareness and knowledge, right? So, hey, we're going to announce why we're doing it. We're going to do some training. We've all seen this in the agile space, right, folks? Where, hey, we're gonna implement the scaled agile framework. We're going to get everyone certified. We're going to give everyone some playbooks, and we're agile. And we know how that went, right? The real value is created in the adoption and impact stage, right? That's where you're turning that knowledge into action, you're driving behaviors, and there's a gap. There is a gap. And I'm not saying that everyone doesn't follow through, but I think many organizations, you see this common theme of, hey, we've announced a change, we told people why, we've trained them, and then they have this illusion that the outcomes will automatically follow, right? The old, hey, we've rolled everything out, we went live, and we're done. And that's really kind of where that illusion starts, right? They assume the desired benefits, again, cost savings, revenue growth, productivity gains, etc., are going to magically appear. Like they took a blue pill and they're just waiting for these outcomes to show up. And they don't necessarily focus on the adoption and impact piece. And gang, I think I think I know what you're thinking. Like we've all seen this movie before, right? Because I know a lot of folks with it on the phone are change leaders, process excellent folks. They've been involved in the agile space. And so we've seen this movie before where we stop at that knowledge phase and we don't follow through with the actual adoption and measuring the impact. Let's look at the actual agile example, right? I think you can all say, hey, right? We communicated that, hey, we're going to do this thing called Agile. It's going to allow us to deliver faster, deliver value, and empower our employees. It's going to help you work in a more collaborative fashion. It's more fit than waterfall for something as complex as software development. This is about where you're going to have more empowerment. So that's that desired piece. We're going to do some training on Agile, Scrum, Safe, etc. We're going to get you certified. We're going to bring in some new tools, Jira and Rally, and away we go. And what we historically have seen there in a lot of organizations is the results ultimately become, wow, Agile failed. It doesn't work, right? So we've done the training. Nope, this Agile thing doesn't work here, right? And it's really because they failed to really drive the adoption and impact, right? That is where the value is created. And I'm sure some of you have had positive experiences that organizations did lean in to the adoption piece and really provide that hands-on helpful resources to allow organizations to build upon that knowledge and actually apply the change in real work, and allow them to be able to provide feedback to their leaders on maybe where some changes are needed. So the reality is what we're seeing in the industry is AI is heading down the same path, folks. Okay. And we have proof in that. There was a study done by MIT in August of last year, and it talked a little bit about, based off of that study, a lot of these adoptions of AI initiatives are failing, and failing is it's a strong word, right? And whenever I talk about failure in any type of change initiative, I talk about it's not delivering on the outcomes, right? And there are some themes that they saw amongst their study. And it very much aligns to kind of that adoption piece, poor integration into real work. They think it's just this bolt on that will allow work to get done. And perhaps the tools don't fit. And there's then low adoption and low impact. AI is a wonderful technology, but it's only as good as how you use it. And we need to upskill our people. And one of the themes that they saw was not many organizations are investing the time needed, right? Past the training, the coaching, the hands-on practical experience in day-to-day work. Many organizations are treating AI as plug and play. Oh yeah, we can use, we have a hammer, which is AI. We were just talking to some leaders the other day and one of our clients, and they were saying, they gave the hammer analogy. Oh, well, let's use AI for that, right? Or let's use AI, meaning ChatGPT, for that. Is that the right tool? A lot of times the work involved is actually so extensive that, is the juice worth the squeeze? And there has to be an understanding of what it looks like to actually implement that. Organization misalignment, we've all seen this, where leaders are at the top, they get a whole bunch of studies, they say, wow, we got to do this AI thing, our competitor down the street is doing it, and they really don't understand what's going on the ground floor. And we also see a lot of organizations getting stuck in pilot purgatory, where they're constantly experimenting, which is good, but they're not getting any value from it, right? So they're spending a lot of money, and there has to be a very intentional method of understanding use cases. Where is it going to add the most value, save us the most money? So poll break here. I'll have Prima select, and we want to understand where you personally are at, and are you being enabled to adopt AI? Do you feel like that enablement is allowing you to apply it to day-to-day work? So we're interested to hear how things are going for you. All right, we're halfway home. We got 25. All right, here comes the results. So we're 75% there. And it looks like, yes, there is people out there that have the skills, they're applying them regularly. We learn by doing. I also have developed those skills simply by using it on a daily basis. I too was had basic skills many moons ago, and have been sharpening that axe ever since. And for those of you that haven't experienced yet, I would encourage you to just download one of the tools and start prompting and learn by doing. I think one thing, I've talked a lot negatively about, the adoption gap, but I think it's important to note that we've had seen success stories. This is the Agile example, and it can be done, right? There are studies out there that organizations have adopted Agile and have seen the outcomes that they want. And the important piece there is they've done the hard work within the ability and reinforcement, right? Things like coaching, things like setting goals and upskilling people, creating feedback loops, allowing people to practice safely, right? And provide that feedback. It's hard. It's very hard. And that's why organizations don't typically embark so deeply in these phases. But I do think if you really want to see the benefits that can be gained, you really need to be intentional about this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. The other thing that we saw with successful organizations is they're very good at measuring the adoption, right? Where are the teams that need the most help? What are our systemic issues that we need to tackle at scale? Leadership was engaged, middle management engaged, right? Creating those feedback loops from the people on the ground floor, the people doing the work know best. And so let's create those feedback loops to see what's working and what's not. Reinforcing those behaviors. What are we expecting? Setting expectations and holding people accountable to those expectations. And then obviously continuously improving. So there is hope. There's hope on the AI front that you can achieve the outcomes that you want. It is just a matter of doing the hard work from an adoption and an impact perspective and changing the behaviors. So I talked a little bit about that, but I think it's about this, but I think it's important to recap here. What we've seen and through 15 years of doing consulting and rolling out projects of all different types. The reason that a lot of organizations just don't follow through with adoption and call it a day after that change activation, we've rolled out training, we're good, is that it's hard. It's really, really hard. There's a human element here that, and we need to change behaviors to get the results that we want. And adoption's messy, right? Like it's not one size fits all. And we saw that in the Agile space. We're seeing it in the AI space. You really have to be involved. You can't just buy something off the shelf. You have to shape it for your context. Lack of ownership. So after we're done rolling it out and the Gantt chart is, at the bottom and we're good, who then owns the adoption? Who owns driving and upskilling and making and feedback loops and ensuring people have the right resources? That's always not clear in organizations. And the final thing is with any type of transformation or adoption, let's say, it feels intangible. You can't see it, you can't feel it, and people don't think it can be measured. And we'll talk a little bit about that, right? So it's this gray space, this black box that really causes this behavior of, hey, we rolled out the tools, we had a good strategy, let's start tracking our outcomes and our metrics and see what happens. And when this needle's not moving, the question becomes why. So how do you drive it? And this brings us to one of our learning objectives. How do we drive adoption and impact? What are tactics, mechanisms that we can use to help us and our organization get better at this, right? And ultimately, it's really about how do we change behaviors? Okay, how do we really help people change and make sure they understand what's in it for them and allow them a voice on where they're struggling, some safety. And so the question really is, how do you intentionally design? And that's a really important word that I'm going to anchor to in the next 25 minutes for behavior change. And I've used the word behavior probably about 100 times so far, and I'll probably use it another 100 times because that's what this is all about, right? It's about how, as leaders and change agents, can we intentionally design for the behaviors that are required to achieve the outcomes that we're after. And so we're going to go through three things that we think will help you. And we have some validated learning on the approach. And it's really about this. This is where that concept of capabilities comes in. You guys are probably sitting there saying, wow, this is about building capabilities. Where's this thing about capabilities? Well, this is where it comes in. Um, we're going to focus on our our as leaders. Our focus should be where is value created, and that's where we should be intentionally designing. So we'll talk a little bit about that. All right. So the first thing is let's double click on that ability stage in ACAR. Okay, and let's revisit what we're trying to achieve there. And it's about, again, turning knowledge into behaviors, right? Into action, if you will, so that that change is applied and it starts delivering the measurable outcomes. Yeah, if we put this in another way, because it's a little bit of a mouthful, and if you're talking to a leader, uh, it's just really about how do you operationalize the change so people can apply it. That's really what we're talking about in ability is operationalizing this in our day-to-day work. And this is where this concept of capability comes in, right? Capabilities is the construct that allows us to turn that knowledge, right? That training that we've learned, those skills that we've started to embark on, the learning that we have accrued about all this, right? How do we then transfer them into behaviors and really meaning change applied in real work? And what allows us to do that is this concept of capabilities, right? The ability for people to apply that change consistently and effectively, right? So that's where this whole idea of capabilities comes in. And this allows us to intentionally design what capabilities do we need, right, to help drive this change. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you track those capabilities in a minute. Now, the other piece here that's important is, and this goes back to my agile ways, right? The core construct of delivery, whether it be in software or any of the verticals within an organization, the functions, is really this concept now of a cross-functional team. If there's one thing that is stuck with agile ways of working, is that organizations have realized that a cross-functional team working together with common goals is very powerful. Um, and so that's where the work is getting done. And so that's why if we need to focus on what level do we need to drive these capabilities on, it's at the team level because that's where the work gets done. And teams could be very small, could be 2, 3 people, could be 10, right? But the idea is developing these capabilities that are repeatable across those people so that they are adopting the change and the behavior. Okay. So again, the team's the core unit of delivery. It's where the value is being delivered. The reason that we encourage and focus on that level is because that's where the behaviors are. Now, the individuals will also have needs within the team. We know that. We'll have to upskill them individually. But that is a product of that team being able to deliver value, say, using AI effectively, right? And then really being able to make this visible in how the teams are operating. So the last piece of driving capabilities is this concept of intentionality. And the way that we define intentionality, and it's defined in many different ways, but applying this here is it's deliberate. It's the deliberate application, the discipline of turning that knowledge into consistent real world behavior. Now, I had the pleasure of doing a lot of research on this concept of intentionality and what people have seen. And I came across a couple different research papers that highlighted what they called the elements of intentionality. So things like clarity of purpose, that looks familiar, right? What are we trying to achieve and why should we care? Okay. Next is what are the defined actions that we're asking people to do? Essentially, what does good look like? Uh, Third piece is enablement. How do we apply what good looks like, right? How do we help people with resources to make them better? And then finally, this idea of measurement. How are we progressing? So these are the key elements of intentionality, and it makes sense, right? If you want to be deliberate, we need to have purpose. We need to understand what good looks like. We need to be able to upskill our people to achieve that, and we want to know where we're at on the scale and what's the next step. So it makes sense. And what was really interesting to us was this maps directly to ACCAR and actually brings it one layer in, right? One level layer up, where clarity of purpose obviously maps to awareness and desire. Defined actions map to knowledge. So, do people have the capabilities to apply the change? And do they know what good looks like? Right? On the ability side of things, are people developing the capabilities to apply the change in real work? And do they have the support and resources to do so? Okay. And then on the reinforcement side, it's about measuring progress they made in developing those capabilities. So ADCAR is a beautiful thing. When you layer in intentionality, it helps us drive that adoption even more and hence accelerate the building of those capabilities. So if I bring you back to my image here, we're simply overlaying on the ACCAR model the elements of intentionality. And you can see it aligns fairly well. Obviously, clarity of purpose, mapping to the first two. But in knowledge, we're defining the actions that we want people and teams to take. In the ability, we need to enable them, right? Give them the tools to actually apply the work. And then in measurement, right? How do we know where we're at? How do we know what's next? And being able to anchor to a metric that helps us drive common understanding on where we're at in this journey. And so our focus, right, is really these three stages, right? I feel like clarity of purpose, organizations get it right. I think organizations can do a better job at desire, right? And inviting people to engage in that change. But again, the gap tends to be the ability and reinforcement piece. And that maps to this concept of defining actions, right? Defining actions is kind of a bridge from knowledge to ability. Enablement. So, what capabilities do we want these folks and these teams to develop, and how do we enable them to get there? And then finally, how are we measuring and those capabilities and where they're at on the maturity scale, if you will, so we can give feedback, reinforce why we're doing this, etc. So then ultimately, this is where that whole idea of the capability building comes in, right? Right under adoption and impact, and really turning that knowledge into consistent behaviors and actions, right? That we are defining as the ability to apply the change, a capability. All right. So just a recap, and then we're going to go into one more poll, and then we're going to go into how you can measure adoption, because it is our subject matter expertise. So being intentional includes two things, right? Enabling team capabilities and measuring progress. Okay. Now, knowledge is the bridge, right? Which is going to allow us to define those capabilities and what good looks like. So we're going to take a poll, one more poll here. Stops along the way for people to breathe, myself included. And Prima, do you want to launch that last and final poll? So this is about what we want to gather information here is, does your team have defined AI capabilities, and are you measuring progress against them? Who actually is embarking on this intentionality of driving adoption? Um, and all right, the results are coming in. We're halfway there. And I'll bring it over. So as expected, not many of our participants today have capabilities defined, and are measured, and that's what we're seeing within the organization, within many organizations. It's good to see that organizations that you guys work at are embarking on this journey, and using this approach of building capabilities, and they've defined them. So it looks like 31% there. Uh, 44% have not yet embarked on it. And I hope we can provide some learning on how you can get there. And then finally, we have 5 people that have not necessarily dipped their toe in that AI capability pool, so to speak. So that's very insightful. Thank you for participating in that. And so the final part of this is we want to be able to provide you a mechanism that will allow you to achieve the adoption and impact, right, across these stages of knowledge, ability, reinforcement by defining capabilities, enabling people to get better at them, and then measuring their progress so they can improve. And so the last 13 minutes here will really be about how do I go about implementing these capabilities, measuring them, and what we've learned over the years. And listen, we're biased, right? We own a change measurement platform. That can provide insights to help drive the improvement, a structured approach. And so it aligns here. And we're going to share what we've learned in using them, and provide some examples of how we use them. Right. So again, it comes back to capabilities, right? So we're going to measure capabilities throughout team assessments, and these different strokes for different folks. Take it from me. Assessments could be self evaluated. I am a big fan of that. It gets the people more engaged, right? That desire piece. There's also subject matter experts, observation assessments that could happen, right? Again, it depends on your organization, but that's really what we're talking about when we talk about assessments and how you can conduct them. And so defining capabilities. So we worked with a client of ours to help them define the capabilities that they wanted their delivery teams to master in their first phase of their AI tooling rollout. And ultimately, they've termed it from AI access to AI effectiveness, right? And so you can see there underneath capabilities by dimension, and we call dimensions just a logical grouping of practices that are pretty coupled. And you can see from a delivery standpoint, the dimensions there are AI assisted development, AI assisted testing, product management. Now we're seeing, and we use a lot of these as well, which helps inform this. But we've also worked with a number of clients that then are focused on responsible AI, right? Ensuring the outputs are ensuring the outputs are accurate, ensuring the outputs are ethical, right? Those things are really important. Upskilling, AI literacy. How are we enabling our people? Are they getting better? Do they have common terminology? Can they write structured prompts? All those type of good things. And then obviously the value, right? How are you enhancing the experience? How are you prioritizing your use cases? How are you discovering your use cases? So this is an example of an organization defining the capabilities that they want their teams to get better at and develop. The next piece is, what does good look like? And so for each one of those capabilities, we help them define the different stages, and we call it the iterative behavior change. And so you can see here, this is the growth criteria that they're looking and they're assessing against. And what's nice about this is the example piece. This is what is an example of you fulfilling this. This also drives the improvement, right? And the model that was used here, and I think it's a model that people will relate to, is you in the emerging phase, you always have some contributors on your team that are AI nerds, and they're using it and it's popping up, right? They're sharing prompts. They reference a prompt in an email. You can tell an email was written by AI, right? And they're starting to informally share with others. As we then get through, we then cross the chasm to start to operationalize. We are really talking about, hey, let's define some shared practices. If John, the developer, is using AI to develop unit tests, shouldn't we all be using the same prompts to develop those unit tests, right? So this is about creating shared patterns. Okay, sure, it's not going to be a fit for everything you do, but there is a best practice out there, right? Keeping prompts in version control is a perfect example. Writing structured prompts, and being able to use prompts to generate artifacts. So this is that next step. Next would be what we call optimizing, meaning, hey, we have operationalized it. We've redesigned some workflows, right? We are now tweaking what we've learned. We're constantly applying it and inspecting and adapting to get better at it, right? So it's been incorporated into our day to day. It's been adopted, operationalized, and now we're just learning by doing. And then finally, the transforming stage is really about, we're really starting to see the benefits from a metric standpoint. We're starting to see, we've tweaked it enough that we have this upward trend, this hockey stick trend, where we're starting to see it. And not that all teams get to this transforming stage. The key thing is that they're learning and they're getting better. So this is how we define what good looks like within a capability. And we provide and enable the teams, right? We've also done individual assessments in the AI space and enable people. But this type of structure, right, allows people to see kind of a roadmap for improvement. What's the first step? What are examples of what good looks like? And this helps our client organically grow these capabilities without having, listen, there's coaching needed 100%, but this helps springboard the improvements and allows teams and enables teams to do things on their own. Next is being able to build and apply, right? So that how are we doing? Where are we at on this stage? And what is next? And that's really the most important thing is, yeah, you can understand current state because to determine where you're going and how to get there, you have to understand where you're at. And so, right, by being able to either self-evaluate or have a coach come in and evaluate, understand current state and where you are applying those capabilities is the next step, right? Where are we at and what's next? In this example, this team has some contributors that are really starting to show the love and share the love, and they are AI experts. And that next step is then to formalize that, create shared patterns so that the efficiencies could be gained throughout the team. Enablement. So from our platform, the enablement piece is how can we help teams improve organically? Right? There's never enough coaches to go around. We've learned that throughout the years with all different types of changes. And so how can we make them better? And imagine this, right? AI helps us do that. So within our platform, we have an AI recommendation engine that takes that criteria and then provides 5 recommendations that things they can try to see if they got better. Right. So, and not everyone will apply to everyone. All teams are different, folks. I get that. And so we provide a series of recommendations, right, giving their context for them to then embark on. We also provide resources from the web. We've done 14 months of really extracting what we feel is valuable. We also help our clients create their own documentation in which they can embed into our platform and customize it so that it's accessible, right? So the idea here is really it's about that enablement piece. I'm looking to improve as a team. How do we go about getting better at this, progressing, and without having to depend on outside subject matter expertise? And then ultimately being able to measure, right? So it's not always about the score. Actually, it's probably not about the score, right? But it is about the trends over time. How are we doing? Where do we feel are our highest performing and lowest performing? What is the next thing that we're going to work on? The input to those improvements is context and outcomes. And we help our clients within our platform be able to feed us that information. And then we provide recommendations that you can see that at the top based off of their context and outcomes. And then finally, we have our improvement plan, which is an action plan. And this is that accountability piece, right? So we've identified where we're at. We have resources, a recommendation engine, some great literature that'll help us. Some are customized for us to enable us. What are we then going to hold ourselves to and keep ourselves accountable for that change? Ultimately, this is where we layer in and help drive that bridge from change activation to adoption and impact, is using this concept of team assessments. We have 3. I'm going to use the last 1 minute here just to call out so you know what we have available if you want to reach out. We have an AI readiness assessment that focuses on responsible AI, strategy, the data and tools, the fluency piece. We have a AI enablement and productivity assessment for any type of team. So there's no delivery language in here. And obviously for the delivery teams, we do help a lot of teams on the tech side. So this is a very popular one of ours. We're going to stop. We're going to take one last poll. I want to thank you for your time. We are actually offering a free beta program to get feedback on these assessments. It's a minimal lift. You work with a customer success representative over here. We get you set up quick. The platform has been around for 6 years, very intuitive. We can work with you. And we want to get feedback. We want you to get value from understanding current state and potentially what's next. And then we want to get feedback. Hey, how was the experience? So if you would like to participate, please let us know, and somebody will reach out and we can set up a quick call and get you started fairly quickly. We've done a good job at that.